Hi, welcome back to the Crossroads Calligraphy channel. My name is Renee and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. We're coming to you from Tucson, Arizona, which is traditionally Tohono O'odham land. And today we're talking all about calligraphy layout. What I'm including in this video are just a few main things that I noticed that could elevate a lot of calligraphy that I see online. So we'll be talking about the tools that you could use, the margins, the optical center of your calligraphy layout, as well as different techniques of figuring out what text to put where and what size to make it. So I'll go ahead and flip the camera around and we'll get started. All right, so we're going to naturally start off with what materials you might need to develop your calligraphy layout. And if you've seen my videos, you know I pretty much use the similar things throughout them all. So, some scratch paper to write on. Graph paper will help you, but it's nice to also have a blank page to work with. A set square or a pair of set squares, a ruler, a sharpened pencil sharpener, big eraser, or whatever you have left of your eraser. I like to have a couple paper clips nearby because sometimes I reach for them. Also a practice calligraphy pen. These are the double-ended zig calligraphy markers. One end is a wide end and the other is more narrow. So you can try out different sizes of calligraphy, or you could have the nib that you plan on using, and then some drafting tape. So that, I think, is pretty much what I use. Oh, of course, also a calculator or basic fraction and basic math skills. So we'll go ahead and dive into drafting your layout. Okay, so before you get into how you're actually going to lay out the page, before you even know what size paper you need or what colors you're going to use, what background, well, it's nice to know how you're going to arrange your text. And you might have a small, just one line of text or even one word that you're using, or you might have a full passage that you're working with to develop your piece. So I learned this from Amity Parks to write the text out as one line at first, and then play with different numbers of words per line until you find something that works for the way that you want to present the text. So sometimes that you want to emphasize a word, or you have to fit your text into a certain amount of space. So here's another couple examples of me playing with how I want to arrange the text. So it reads, great quantities moving in waves. In here I have two words, one word, one, two, and then also just the words stacked. Then I did eventually go with the words stacked in the final piece. Alternately, when I do client work, I tend to like to make their pieces so that they will fit in a ready-made frame. I like to present my client pieces framed and ready to hang, because everybody's so excited when they get their calligraphy piece, they just want to slap it on the wall. So what I'll do in that case is I'll start with the space that I have to work with. For this particular piece was a wedding vow commission. These were his wedding vows, and he wanted to present them in a frame with their wedding photo at the top. So what I tend to do with these is I'll write the calligraphy at the size that I want it to be, and then using the pen also that I plan to use, and then I'll see how many words fit in each line. I'll write maybe 4 or 5 lines of the text, and then I average these to figure out about how many words fit per line. And then I divide that into the word count of the entire text. So this was, my goal was 11 to 12 words per line, and the word count was 89 words. So that was roughly 10 to 12 lines that I wanted to give myself to work with. So those are 2 different ways that you can plan ahead for your text, either by sketching it ahead of time and playing with it that way, or playing with the calligraphy. So one more note, that if the calligraphy figuring, if 10 to 12 lines was going to be too many lines, then I would come back to the practice phase and I would use a different calligraphy pen, maybe make the calligraphy smaller or more condensed so that I could fit more words per line and it would fit into this greater area that I was trying to work with. I don't think it's this one. I had another version where I was writing notes of what nib I used, or, oh, here it is. The X height was 1/4 of an inch, and I used a Mitchell 3 broad edge calligraphy nib. So I would know whether I wanted to go up in size or down in size, and I wouldn't have to play with what I was trying to do next. Okay, so I'll preface this next part by saying I am not great at converting decimals to fractions, specifically for inches. I am born and raised in the US, so we were brought up on inches, and the more work I do, the more seriously I consider moving over to centimeters. Just so you know, I'll be rounding a little bit as I do my math. Okay, so I found an example of a 5-inch by 7-inch layout, which I just learned recently that you always give the width measurement and then the length measurement. So if it was this, it would be, if it were turned, it would be 7 inches by 5 inches. It's like you're reading left to right and then down. So anyway, we have this 5 by 7 piece, and I was asked to make a signature cocktail sign for a friend's wedding, and they wanted to frame it later. So 5 by 7 was the size that we went with. And you'll notice that I have the margins, I have lines around the edges. These mark the margins here. And if the only thing that you take away from this video is this next part, you'll be all right. So you always want more space at the bottom of the page, more empty space at the bottom of the page than you do at the top. Okay, and I'll just say that one more time. You always want more space at the empty space at the bottom of the page than you do at the top. The bottom margin is about twice, maybe I should say what margin means. Margin means empty space at the edge for our purposes here. That's what the margin means, an intentional space left at the edge, remaining at the edge. Okay, so how do we figure out how much of a margin to leave? So we're going to take the height here, 7 inches, and we're going to multiply it by 5%. So bear with me. 7 times, 5%, 0.35. Okay, so for me that's going to be a little bit bigger than 1/2 inch. No, it's going to be a little bit bigger than 1/4 of an inch. I left the top margin at 1/4 of an inch for other less specific things, I would put it between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. But you also want to match the width of the top margin for your side margins. So these 3 sides, 1, 2, and 3, the margin is the same amount. And that can scale up or down depending on the piece that you're, or the area that you're working in. So from 5 inches by 7 inches to even a wall space, even leaving margins for murals is important. Okay, and then the bottom margin is going to be twice that. So this was 1/4 of an inch, so this would be 1/2 inch. I believe it's more here, but that's okay. So these are the intentional spaces that are left empty. No calligraphy goes in these edges. Now, this is because just as the guidelines act as a geometric container for our calligraphy, the margins of the page act like a geometric container for the entire work. And what they do is they guide the eye. They keep the eye moving in a certain way. And the mind, just like in our calligraphy with guidelines, the mind likes a little bit of space around different things so it can process the information better. So think of the empty space as air. Like if you're saying a sentence and you're starting to run out of air, it gets really stressful. So if you're looking at a piece and it has not really enough space for your mind's eye to travel through it properly, it's a little stressful to look at. And with layout, we're trying to invite our viewer into our piece, not get them to look away. So margins help to invite and retain someone's interest. So then we have another line here, and it's marked OC, and that stands for optical center. Ooh. Optical center is a little bit above the mathematical center. The mind perceives the optical center as the center of the page. So this prevents the issue of it looking like your text is falling off of the page. If it's too close to the bottom of the page, and if there's not room, empty space here to catch your text, then it looks like the text is falling off the page. It's a little unsettling. So optical center is 46% from the top. So we have 7 times 46%. That gives us 3.22 inches. I round that to 3.25, and that is where this line is. Okay, so let's look at a couple examples where I didn't follow this layout procedure because I didn't know it. So here I had an idea and I laid it out and I just went with it. And already you can see that there's 0 space at the bottom of, there's 0 empty space at the bottom of the page. I also did not practice the calligraphy first whatsoever, so it's very hard to read and kind of hard to follow, like where I want the viewer to start. Okay. Another, I mean, it's really subtle, but there's less space at the bottom than there is at the top. The side margins are okay, but and even in each of these actually, the attribution or the credit or the author should be a little bit smaller, because if it's the same size, I'm making sure that the credit is of the same significance as the text. So the reader, if they're not familiar with who the author is, they would just continue reading it as part of the text. So that makes a difference. Sizing up your calligraphy and sizing it down depending on what you want to emphasize makes a difference. Okay, so coming back to our 5x7 layout, I think this is layout bond, and I had paper clipped these together, and I'm sure I used my light table to be able to see the margins through. I didn't realize I was going to talk about hierarchy of text, but I'm glad that I'm glad that I chose this piece. So here we have, again, 5x7. The top and side margins are similar, and then the bottom margin is bigger. Okay. And then you can see also that I've mixed a couple different types of text. So what we're emphasizing here is the old-fashioned and the cosmopolitan. Those are the signature cocktails. So from far away, someone's going to see these two, and as they get closer, they'll be able to read his favorite is this, her favorite is this. I think this is a good example of the hierarchy of text. This line is actually at optical center. Whoa, let me line these up. This line is at optical center, which usually I would put it above, but I didn't want it to get too close to the F. Here are the main takeaways from the video. Just as the guidelines are a geometric container for our calligraphy, so the layout and margins are a geometric container for the entire piece. Start off by sketching your layout in pencil, either the text arrangement and/or the size of the page. Practice the calligraphy at size. How many words fit per line? Compare the calligraphy with how much space you need. You might need to adjust the size of the calligraphy, your layout, or the intended size of the finished work. Lastly, factor in the optical center and margins for your final piece. Then, do your calligraphy. Okay, so those are some of the basic tools that I use to ensure that there's enough space around my work and that it's inviting to the viewer. There are lots of other design techniques that you could use, but I think the most important thing is to take a little time with a pencil and a plain piece of paper and just play with your layout and play with the text until you feel that you've created a composition that you really like. Any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below, and we'll see you again next time.